Lao Tzu said, "Clear serenity and joyous harmony are the human essence. Standards and guidelines are regulators of affairs. When you know the human essence, you develop yourself spontaneously without violating it. When you know how to regulate affairs, then your actions will not be chaotic. To give out one directive that disperses endlessly, unifying all through one organ, this is called heart. To see the root and thereby know the branches, hold to the one and thereby respond to the manifold, this is called art. To know the reason why you are living where you are, to know where you are going, when you are going somewhere, to know what means you are depending on when you work, and to know where to stop when you act, this is called the way. What makes others laud and praise you as high-minded and wise is mental power. What makes others despise you and repudiate you is mental error. When words have issued from the mouth, they cannot be withheld from others. Actions that were initiated close at hand cannot be prevented from reaching afar. Works are hard to accomplish and easily foiled. Fame is hard to establish and easily outdated. Ordinary people all make light of small injuries and slight, subtle things, until they get to the big problems. When disaster comes, it is people themselves who have produced it. When fortune comes, it is people themselves who perfect it. Calamity and fortune come through the same gate. Gain and loss are from the same neighborhood. Unless one is completely clear, one cannot distinguish them. Knowledge and thought are the door of calamity and fortune. Activity and stillness are the pivot of gain and loss. It is imperative to watch carefully. That was Chapter 105 from Wen Tzu, Understanding the Mysteries. Further Teachings of Lao Tzu, translated by Thomas Cleary. Welcome to Tea Time with Cassius. My name is Cassius King, and I am the producer of this show. The things that you will hear over the next approximately an hour represent the views and opinions of Tea Time with Cassius and the people making them. All opinions and quotations in no way represent River West Radio and are the sole responsibility of the producer, guests, and callers. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues arising from the content of this program. And thanks again for tuning in. We hope you enjoy, or at least find interesting, or at least worth listening to, or hopefully at the very least you've fallen asleep with your radio dial tuned in here and are too lazy to change it. I wanted to let you know that this weekend at Linneman's, starting at about 8 o'clock, is a benefit for the radio station. We hope to see you there. There will be a number of different performers, some from the station, some friends of members of the station. All in all, it'll be fun, and we could really use your support. Hope to see you there. From the Foucault Reader, edited by Paul Rabinow, an introduction to Foucault's thought with major new unpublished material. Biopower. From the chapter, Right of Death and Power over Life, from the History of Sexuality, Volume 1. For a long time, one of the characteristic privileges of sovereign power was the right to decide life and death. In a formal sense, it derived no doubt from the ancient patria potestas, the granted the father of the Roman family, the right to dispose of the life of his children and his slaves. Just as he had given them life, so he could take it away. By the time the right of life and death was framed by the classical theoreticians, it was in considerably diminished form. It was no longer considered that this power of the sovereign over his subjects could be exercised in an absolute and unconditional way, but only in cases where the sovereign's very existence was in jeopardy, a sort of right of rejoinder. If he was threatened by external enemies who sought to overthrow him or contest his rights, he could then legitimately wage war and require his subjects to take part in the defense of the state without directly proposing their death. He was empowered to expose their life. In this sense, he wielded an indirect power over them of life and death. But if someone dared to rise up against him and transgress his laws, then he could exercise a direct power over the offender's life. A punishment, the latter could be put to death. Viewed in this way, the power of life and death was not an absolute privilege. It was conditioned by the defense of the sovereign and his own survival. Must we follow Hobbes in seeing it as the transfer to the prince of the natural right possessed by every individual to defend his life, even if this meant the death of others? Or should it be regarded as a specific right that was manifested with the formation of the new juridical being, the sovereign? In any case, in its modern form, relative and limited as in its ancient and absolute form, the right of life and death is a disymmetrical one. The sovereign exercised his right of life only by exercising his right to kill, or by refraining from killing. He evidenced his power over life only through the death he was capable of requiring. The right which was formulated as the power of life and death was in reality the right to take life or let live. Its symbol, after all, was the sword. Perhaps this juridical form must be referred to as a historical type of society in which power was exercised mainly as a means of deduction, a subtraction mechanism, a right to appropriate a portion of the wealth, a tax of products, goods and services, labor and blood, levied on the subjects. Power in this instance was essentially a right of seizure of things, time, bodies, and ultimately life itself. It culminated in the privilege to seize hold of life in order to suppress it. Since the classical age, the West has undergone a very profound transformation of these mechanisms of power. Deduction has tended to be no longer the major form of power, but merely one element among others, working to incite, reinforce, control, monitor, optimize, and organize the forces under it. a power bent on generating forces, making them grow, and ordering them, rather than one dedicated to impeding them, making them submit, or destroying them. Has been a parallel shift in the right of death, or at least a tendency to align itself with the existence of a life administering power, and to define itself accordingly. This death that was based on the right of the sovereign is now manifested as simply the reverse of the right of the social body to ensure, maintain, or develop its life. Yet wars were never as bloody as they have been since the 19th century, and all things being equal, never before did regimes visit such holocausts on their own populations. But this formidable power of death, and this is perhaps what accounts for part of its force, and the cynicism with which it has so greatly expanded its limits, now presents itself as the counterpart of a power that exerts a positive influence on life, that endeavors to administer, optimize, and multiply it, subjecting it to precise controls and comprehensive regulations. Wars are no longer waged in the name of a sovereign who must be defended. They are waged on behalf of the existence of everyone. Entire populations are mobilized for the purpose of wholesale slaughter in the name of life necessity. Massacres have become vital. It is as managers of life and survival, of bodies and the race, that so many regimes have been able to wage so many wars, causing so many men to be killed. And through a turn that closes the circle, as the technology of wars has caused them to tend increasingly toward all-out destruction, the decision that initiates them and the one that terminates them are in fact increasingly informed by the naked question of survival. The atomic situation is now at the end point of this process. The power to expose a whole population to death is the underside of the power to guarantee an individual's continued existence. The principle underlying the tactics of battle, that one has to be capable of killing in order to go on living, has become the principle that defines the strategy of states. But the existence in question is no longer the juridical existence of sovereignty. At stake is the biological existence of a population. If genocide is indeed the dream of modern powers, this is not because of a recent return of the ancient right to kill. It is because power is situated and exercised at the level of life. The species, the race, and the large-scale phenomena of population. On another level, I might have taken up the example of the death penalty, together with war. It was for a long time the other form of the right of the sword. It constituted the reply of the sovereign to those who attacked his will, his law, or his person. Those who died on the scaffold because fewer and fewer in contrast to those who died in wars. But it was for the same reasons that the latter became more numerous, and the former more and more rare. As soon as power gave itself the function of administering life, its reason for being and the logic of its exercise, and not the awakening of humanitarian feelings, made it more and more difficult to apply the death penalty. How could power exercise its highest prerogative by putting people to death when its main role was to ensure, sustain, and multiply life, to put this life in order? For such a power, execution was at the same time a limit, a scandal, and a contradiction. Hence, capital punishment could not be maintained except by invoking less the enormity of the crime itself than the monstrosity of the criminal, his incorrigible, and the safeguard of society. One had the right to kill those who represented a kind of biological danger to others. One might say that the ancient right to take life or let live was replaced by a power to foster life or disallow it to the point of death. This is perhaps what explains that disqualification of death, which marks the recent wane of the rituals that accompanied it. That death is so carefully evaded and is linked less to a new anxiety which makes death unbearable for our societies than to the fact that the producers of power have not ceased to turn away from death. In the passage from this world to the other, death was the manner in which a terrestrial sovereignty was relieved by another, singularly more powerful sovereignty. The pageantry that surrounded it was in the category of political ceremony. Now it is over life. Throughout its unfolding, that power establishes its domination. Death is power's limit. The moment that escapes it, death becomes the most secret aspect of existence, the most private. It is not surprising that suicide, once a crime, since it was a way to usurp the power of death, which the sovereign alone, whether the one here below or the Lord above, had the right to exercise, became in the course of the 19th century one of the first conducts to enter into the sphere of sociological analysis. It testified to the individual and private right to die at the borders and in the interstices of power that was exercised over life. This determination to die, strange and yet so persistent and constant in its manifestations, and consequently so difficult to explain as being due to particular circumstances or individual accidents, was one of the first astonishments of a society in which political power had assigned itself the task of administering life. Tune in next week for a continued reading of the Foucault Reader, edited by Paul Rabinow, from the chapter Right of Death and Power over Life. Why are the people starving? Because those above them are taxing them too heavily. That is why they are starving. Why are the people hard to manage? Because those above them are fussy and have private ends to serve. That is why they are hard to manage. Why do the people make light of death? Because those above them make too much of life. That is why they make light of death. The people have simply nothing to live upon. They know better than to value such a life. That was Chapter 75 from the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, translated by John C.H. Wu. For this week's recipe, we will be reading Sri Wasano's infamous Indonesian rice salad. The recipe will prepare about 4 to 6 servings. The ingredients that you will need are 2 cups cooked cooled brown rice, a half cup raisins, 2 chopped scallions, a quarter cup toasted sesame seeds, 1/2 cup thinly sliced water chestnuts, 1 cup of fresh mung bean sprouts, 1/4 cup toasted cashews, 1 large chopped green pepper, 1 stalk chopped celery. It looks nice if you slice it on the diagonal. And a trick taught to me by a Thai woman on methods of cooking in a Southeastern Asian way is to rotate a vegetable while cutting it at a diagonal angle. You will also need fresh parsley. For the dressing, you'll need 3/4 cups orange juice, 1/2 cup safflower oil, 1 tablespoon sesame oil, 3 to 4 tablespoons tamari sauce, 2 tablespoons dry sherry, juice of 1 lemon, 1 to 2 cloves minced garlic, probably 3, 1/2 to 1 teaspoon freshly grated ginger root, and salt and pepper to taste. One note on the orange juice, I do believe they are implying fresh squeezed, or at the very least all natural, not from concentrate, no high fructose syrup orange juice. Combine all of the ingredients and serve chilled on greens. Top with duck sauce, which along with the bean sprouts, sesame oil, and ginger root. It is available in most Oriental food supply stores. And if you are indeed in the River West area, the River West Co-op on a regular basis does supply ginger root. Variations to this recipe include 1/2 cup thinly sliced bamboo shoots, fresh raw show peas, fresh pineapple chunks, toasted coconut, unsweetened, and 1 cup raw rice cooked in 1 3/4 cups boiling salted water. And that is how you make Sri Wasano's infamous Indonesian rice salad. That has been a recipe from the Moosewood Cookbook by Molly Katzen. Tune in next week for another recipe. Last week, we started reading from a book called Behold a Pale Horse, from the chapter entitled Proposed Constitutional Model of the New States of America. And from what I gather, it's not exactly what I expected. It's a series of documents detailing the establishment or the rules behind a different constitution. And as interesting as that may be, it was not exactly what I had planned on. And so we are going to, at least for the time being, read from a different chapter from the same book. And that chapter will be, drum roll please, or just start banging on any hard object you can find. Chapter 13, Treason in High Places. The United Nations Treaty and the United Nations Participation Act versus the sovereignty of the United States of America. At the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention in September 1787, Benjamin Franklin was asked, "What have you wrought?" He answered, "A republic, if you can keep it." The United States Constitution, Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state of the contrary notwithstanding, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Have we already joined a one-world government? U.S. sovereignty, fact or fiction? The executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the United States government have followed the policy that the United Nations Treaty approved under the UN Participation Act of 1945 in behalf of the United States of America by Harry S. Truman and the United States Senate, which treaty supersedes the United States Constitution under the terms of Article 6 of the United States Constitution. The Council of Foreign Relations created the United Nations. Their member agents, Alger Hiss and Leo Pasvalsky, did the paperwork, but the honors went to a special committee appointed by President Roosevelt to draw the first draft of the Charter. The members of the committee were Sumner Welles, Isaiah Bowman, Hamilton Fish Armstrong, Benjamin Cohen, and Clark Eichelberger, all members of the Council on Foreign Relations and members of a secret order of the Quest called the Jason Society. The charter was rushed through the U.S. Senate without printed copies to guide the senators. It was explained to them by Russian-born revolutionary Leo Pasvalsky. The charter conferred no real power on the General Assembly. All the power was in the Security Council, where the veto was. The Senate would not have ratified the charter except that the American delegation had a right to veto it if our interests were threatened by action of other members. Included in this charter was and is Article 25. Member nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present charter. No restrictions, no reservations. This is all of Article 25. Note the word present, indicating that there might be other charters. The veto was a hindrance to world government. It had to be circumvented. In 1950, the General Assembly, without any legal authority, met and adopted what they named the Uniting for Peace Resolution. This greatly expanded, since that time permitted the General Assembly to exercise the powers of the Security Council. I bet you didn't know that. The government of the United States recognizes the illegally amended charter as the law of the world, overriding our Constitution. The General Assembly has for years been making the law of the world by ratifying resolutions by a two-thirds majority vote. When the resolution is ratified, it is sent down to the chief executive of the member state, and the executive is obliged to accept and carry out the provisions in the resolution. The governments concerned must ignore, abolish, revise, and rescind laws in their territories which conflict with the resolutions of the General Assembly, and to pass other laws which will put these resolutions into force. One man, one vote comes through resolution number 1760. There are more than 2,000 of these resolutions now in effect. They are the law of the land. Our civil rights laws, the ex post facto sections of which came from the Nuremberg resolutions, our agricultural laws, our health and welfare laws, our labor laws, our foreign aid laws, all come from resolutions of the General Assembly or treaties of the UN ratified by our Senate. Any law passed in your state will be rescinded or abolished if it is in conflict with resolutions of the General Assembly. I can tell you with no reservations whatsoever that all of the intelligence organizations of the United States work directly for the United Nations in concert with the secret government toward the sole purpose of the destruction of the sovereignty of the United States of America and the bringing about of the one world government. The authority cited for their efforts in Article 6 of the Constitution, the United Nations Treaty, and the UN Participation Act of 1945, signed by Harry S. Truman with the advice and consent of the U.S. Senate. This should help you understand how our laws are being made and who is making them. Ask your senators, congressmen, and state legislators if they are aware of these acts. The following statement was made by Mr. Carl B. Ricks of Milwaukee, former president of the American Bar Association, before a Senate subcommittee which was hearing testimony on the proposed Bricker Amendment. It was entered into the House record by Honorable Lawrence H. Smith, Wisconsin, on May 11, 1955. Congressional Record, page A3220. Statement of Carl B. Ricks of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I appear in favor of the amendments. Congress is no longer bound by its constitutional system of delegated powers. Its only test is under the obligatory power to promote human rights in these fields of endeavor: civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. These are found in Article 55 and 56 of the Chapter of the United Nations, a ratified and approved treaty. They are being promoted in all parts of the world by the United Nations. Congress may now legislate as an uninhibited body with no shackles of delegated powers under the Constitution. Our entire system of a government of delegated powers of Congress has been changed to a system of undelegated powers without amendment by the people of the United States. The authority for these statements is found in a volume entitled Constitution of the United States of America, annotated, issued in 1953, prepared under the direction of the Judiciary Committee of the Senate of the United States and under the chairmanship of Professor Edward S. Corwin of Princeton. Aided by the legal staff of the Library of Congress, this is a conclusion on page 427 of the annotations. Quote, in a word, the treaty power cannot purport to amend the Constitution by adding to the list of Congress's enumerated powers. But having acted, the consequence will often be that it has provided Congress with an opportunity to enact measures which, independently of a treaty, Congress could not pass, and the only question that can be raised as to such measures will be whether they are necessary and proper measures for the carrying out of the treaty in question into operation. End quote. It will be noted that one of the principal cases cited is that of the migratory bird case. These conclusions are those also of a committee of the New York State Bar Association, of which former Attorney General Mitchell and Mr. John W. Davis were prominent members. Now, for some practical illustration of newfound powers under treaties of what Congress may do. 1. It may enact a comprehensive education bill providing for education in any state which does not provide it. In fact, it may take over all public education now provided by states and municipalities. 2. It may enact a Prohibition Act without an amendment of the Constitution. 3. It may enact a Uniform Divorce Act. 4. It may take over all social and welfare services rendered by our through the states or their agencies. 5. It may take over all commerce, all utility rates and services, all labor. The list may be multiplied extensively at your will. The new test of constitutionality will apply to all legislation by Congress since 1945, which deals with any of the 5 fields of endeavor. Any judge deciding on the validity of legislation must have 2 books before him. 1, the Constitution of the United States, and the other, the Charter of the United Nations. If he does not find authority for the act in the Constitution, he will find it in the Charter. This is the exact situation in which Justice Holmes found himself and the other members of the Supreme Court when they decided the migratory bird case. The authority was not found in the Constitution. It was found in the treaty with Great Britain. The question to be answered is this: under which form of government do the people of the United States prefer to live? Manifestly, we cannot operate under both. Senators, the people of the United States, have given up their sons. They have given up billions of their substance. They should not be the only nation in the world to give up their form of government. The wonder of the world, to discharge their obligations to the people of the world. The Bricker Amendment, which would have changed this, was not passed. Well, that concludes our readings for this evening. That was from the chapter 13, Treason in High Places, from Behold a Pale Horse, by William Milton Cooper. Tune in next week for continuation of this and other readings. You've been listening to Tea Time with Cassius. I am your host, Cassius King. Remember, come this Saturday or Sunday to Linneman's around 8 o'clock. There will be a benefit for the radio station. There will be numerous different acts that we hope you will enjoy. We hope to see you there and have a good evening.
Recording.